Hello there, Josh Moore here, Red Door Church, South Royalton, Vermont. What would you say if someone asked you, should marijuana be legalized? How would you respond to that question? Is it something that you've thought about? I think for many people it's an emotional issue and not necessarily one that maybe they've put a lot of thought into. It just seems obvious one way or the other to people that it should be legal or that it shouldn't be legal. I think it's more of an emotional discussion probably for your average person than it is an intellectual one. It's not something that maybe a lot of thought has been put into. Well, I want to encourage all of you, if you're able, if you're local, anywhere in the area within, say, half hour, 45-minute drive, I do believe it would be worth your time to come down to South Royalton and go over to the Vermont Law School tomorrow if you're able to do so and hear a conference that's being put on. I've got the invitation right here. The question is, should Vermont legalize marijuana? It's a conference. It says Marijuana Legalization in Vermont, Arguments, Considerations, and Perspectives. It's an all-day conference, and it's an opportunity for students, faculty, community members, and interested Vermonters to hear from individuals on both sides of the marijuana legalization issue and who are at the forefront of the discussion in Vermont. Students from VLS and UVM will kick off the day by putting on a live debate on the topic. Speakers will include experts, entrepreneurs, business leaders, healthcare workers, law enforcement, and state and local officials, and members of the Vermont legislature. So they're going to address a range of issues from a range of perspectives. I think it's going to be just a fantastic opportunity for us to listen and to hear and to sort of deepen our understanding of the relevant, the areas that are going to be affected and the relevant issues. If you are available, it's look like it's 8:30 a.m. to 4. It's going to be in the Chase Community Center, so I really just want to encourage you to come out. And I don't know, I guess maybe there'll be opportunities to ask questions, or if nothing else, just to listen in and to educate yourself a little bit on what is, again, a very emotional issue. And I wanted to read something as well to give you a little something to chew on. I know there's strong arguments in my mind on both sides. I've talked about this with a number of folks just lately. The cons, the pros. Some folks will say on the side of the cons, they'll say things like this. They'll say, well, marijuana is a gateway drug, and so why do we want to legalize something that's going to lead maybe down the road to more hardcore drugs? Why are we going to do that? They'll say maybe something like, well, it's not necessarily beneficial. Should we legalize things that aren't beneficial, that are going to actually encourage people to destroy their bodies or their minds or whatever? Should we do that? It's going to create other potential hazards. So you're going to legalize marijuana, and you're going to say, now you're going to have all these people driving down the road that are doped up on marijuana, and that's going to create other problems, other complications. Do we really want, say, teachers coming into school high and teaching the school children or whatnot? So it might lead to a lessening of regulation in some areas, but it's going to increase regulation in other areas. Schools and all of these other public institutions are going to begin to have to pass all these sorts of restrictions on it because the state has legalized it, or either that or allow their workers, to operate heavy machinery and to teach children and whatnot while they're high on marijuana. So it's going to complicate things in that particular regard. It's enslaving. Why do we want to promote something, or at least allow something that's enslaving to people? It's addictive. Why are we going to do that? Why are we going to go down that road? So those might be some of the arguments on the cons. And on the pros, you might have folks say something like this, which this will probably be very much the case here in Vermont. You're going to hear something like this. Well, it could be taxed and money could be made off of it. Well, in Vermont, maybe as some of you know, there's a huge deficit. We're spending a lot more than the revenue that we're bringing in. And some might say we could close that gap. We could significantly put a dent in our deficit and balance our budget if we were to legalize marijuana and tax it. Let the states regulate it, let Vermont regulate it, and do it that way. So there's a benefit, there's a pro. They would say if we were to legalize it, we would probably get a lot of nonviolent people out of jail. where they're learning to do violent crime, where they're becoming more hardened and deepened in the criminal life. We stopped sending them to these places where they're essentially being institutionalized and taught how to be hardcore criminals. So we'd stop that sort of endless cycle. We'd stop wasting money on a failed policy, enforcing something that's just going nowhere, spending all our, having our law enforcement tied up, chasing down people who maybe aren't really all that bad of people. They're just caught up in an addiction or whatever, and they're nonviolent. We would remove the black market, which again goes along with the previous point that say, a lot of the violence that's created by drugs isn't necessarily a product of the drugs themselves. It's a product of the fact that they're illegal. So if we make them legal, you'd remove the black market, and a lot of the violence associated with the drugs would go away. They might say things like that. And there's a lot of other things, that could easily be said. And I wanted to quote maybe more famous politician Ron Paul from his book Liberty Defined. He speaks to this issue, and I wanted to throw this out there into the mix. And he definitely would be an advocate of allowing the states to regulate drugs, specifically marijuana in this case, because he believes that it's that regulating that a federal ban not only is unconstitutional, but it's just failed, and then he likens it to prohibition. So let me read what he says here. Throw that out there, something for you to chew on, and then we can be on our way here. But he says this. This is from his chapter on prohibition. Prohibition is not compatible with a free society. Prohibiting acts of violence is one thing, but laws that prohibit the use of certain substances, food, drugs, or alcohol, by adults is a dangerous intrusion on personal liberty. Prohibition is motivated by busybodies who have a gross misunderstanding of the unintended consequences of attempts to improve other people's habits and character through government force. Time and time again, we are shown that it simply does not work. If there are to be any regulations on the use of certain substances in the United States, it was intended that this should be done by the individual states, not by the federal government. So, of course, maybe many of you are very familiar with what prohibition was. Ron Paul says this, but he says the experiment with prohibition was with outright prohibition of all alcoholic beverages in the United States started with the passage of the 18th Amendment on January 29th, 1919. And so in the end, the prohibition of alcoholic beverages was outlawed, and now I believe it is regulated by the states or whatever. And he would say that's more appropriate. That's how drugs should be done. Drugs should be regulated by the states. Not only could the states make money off of it, but you'd reduce all the violent crime, and we'd stop spending all our money on law enforcement and all that other stuff on it, and hardening our criminals and whatnot. So a lot of those arguments would be Paul's arguments on that issue. But nonetheless, I'm not saying one way or the other where I stand exactly on it. I hope to go tomorrow and educate myself a little bit on the issues. I have some thoughts and things I'm working with here, but I can't really confidently say where I stand at this point on the issue. It's a complex issue. It's a nuanced issue. I don't necessarily think that just because I might believe that smoking pot, that doing a drug like that is unethical, which I think in many cases it can be unethical for a person to do that. I'm not saying that there's not instances where, say, medicinal marijuana, that if it's serving some sort of a medicinal purpose, that it can't be useful and good and beneficial. But I can definitely see an argument to say that that maybe in many cases it is unethical and immoral for a person to sit around and just smoke weed just because, and spend their half their family's income on it or whatever. I can see that being a huge problem, but I don't necessarily think that means we should make it illegal. It's not right for somebody to go down to the McDonald's and eat 20 hamburgers in one sitting, but I don't know that we should regulate that and make that illegal either. So anyway, I don't really know where I stand on the issue, but I'm going to be there tomorrow. I want to encourage you to come out if you're local, if you're able to. I think it's going to be an exciting time, and hope to learn something. So anyways, get your thinking caps on, and maybe we'll see you out there tomorrow. All right, take care.